What is going on, guys? Zuko back with another Dragonflight video. We are back on the Enhancement Shaman. This is the last video in the series for all the Enhancement Shaman builds that we've been comparing over the last week or so. So this is it. We're going to rank them all right here with the tier maker that I've got, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm going to go through each build and talk about the categories. Let me just show you what I've got here in terms of this. I'll bring this in. So here's the tier maker that we have. The total score will be at the top. We got it of 25. We're going to have damage, difficulty, Maelstrom weapon stack generation, and tier set bonus interaction. So again, the four builds that we're comparing are the Storm build, the Flamestrike build, the Elementalist build, and the FireBlaster build. And I've got all the icons right here. And yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown on the build. Like for 30 seconds, I'm just going to talk about the build, what it does, a little recap, and then I will start ranking it into this here. And I've got a list to show you exactly what score each build got in case you didn't watch the videos from before. Okay, so let's just dive right in, and we're going to start, in fact, with the Storm build. So really quickly, what does the Storm build do? Once again, this is going to be your talent tree setup here, and I will link all the talent trees down below. You're mostly focused on proccing deeply rooted elements, right, by pressing Stormstrike as much as you can. Legacy of the Frost Witch helps to reset your Stormstrike. This is the fuel that sort of makes the engine keep going. You've got big cooldowns with Doom Winds and Sundering. The difficulty of this build is quite easy. The Maelstrom weapon stack generation is really high. The tier set bonus interaction is pretty strong. So this is kind of what the build does. You're just going to be in Ascendance all the time, and when you're in Ascendance, you're launching lightning bolts at enemies over and over and over again, so it's really solid. Okay, so here's our tier list maker right here, and I've got the score on the left-hand side. For damage, it's getting an 8 out of 10. It's got 5 out of 5 for AoE, 3 out of 5 for single target. Again, the single target can suffer a little bit. Most of the builds for Enhance suffer in single target damage, period. But this one, in particular, there are moments where you're just not getting the reset that you're kind of looking for, and your single target damage can go down because you don't have a lot of options. But that's it. 8 out of 10 for damage. The difficulty is 5 out of 5, which means that it is going to be a very easy to play build. I know that that can be kind of confusing for some people, but if it has a high score on difficulty, it means that it's not very hard to play at all. The difficulty is really low, which is great. The ease of use is, the rotation is easy to master. The idea behind the build is very, very easy. So it's going to get 5 out of 5 for the difficulty. For Maelstrom weapon stack generation, it's also getting 5 out of 5. This build generates the most Maelstrom weapon stacks of any build that's on this list, period. So it's definitely going to get 5 out of 5 for the Maelstrom weapon stack generation. And then the tier set bonus, it's only going to get 4 out of 5. I know this kind of looks funny right now because there's no other builds here, but it's only going to get 4 out of 5. I think in my video for the Storm build, I ranked it 5 out of 5, but I've been just reviewing all the builds, and I'm going to make a couple of modifications because I do think that this build does not interact with the tier set bonus as well as some of the other builds do, because we're so heavily indexed into physical damage and nature damage. That's it. So we're only getting sort of 2 elements there. So the mastery bonus that you get from Sundering, you're not getting as big of a bonus as some of the other builds, like the Elementalist build or the Fire builds, where all of their damage is fire damage. So they're getting, the mastery bonus is really kicking in for them, and the fire damage bonus is kicking in from the tier set bonuses. So it's like they're getting both of those, whereas on the Storm build here, we're doing a lot of physical damage, which does not get benefit from mastery in the same way that the other builds do. Okay, so it's only getting 4 out of 5 for the tier set bonus. I want to make sure that I clear it up. You can see it right here, 4 out of 5. The total score is going to be 22 out of 25 for the Storm build. So very, very good. It's going to sit here like this for now. This will change as we get to the other builds, as we start adding in some more icons here. Okay, here's the next build. This is the FireBlaster build on our list. You can see the transmog has changed. This build revolves almost entirely around Fire Nova, and it is entirely indexed into fire damage. There's no frost damage here. There's not even really much physical damage here. We're going all the way down the right side of the tree into Primordial Wave. Elemental Spirits, you're hoping to obviously get the Fire Dogs. This build was good. it was pretty solid. What you're trying to do with this build is set up your flame shocks with your lava lash, spread them around, get a big primordial wave window with your lightning bolt, and then you're detonating fire nova to do tons of AoE damage. So again, I think this build is probably one of the better ones on fortified, but it really suffers on tyrannical because you don't have as much single target damage. But you're also relying on hot hand. You're tab targeting through enemies to get the lashing flames debuff on them. And on single target, you do get a bit of a buff from Elemental Blast if you want it, but that's a flexible talent. You can put that somewhere else if you want to as well. This is the FireBlaster Build. Let's see how it kind of stacks up against the Storm build. Okay, so for damage, we've got 5 out of 5 for AoE and 2 out of 5 for single target. So it's going to get a total of 7. So it's going to go below the Storm build now, because remember the Storm build was 8 out of 10 instead. So this is only 7 out of 10. So that's the first step. Again, the AoE damage is very strong. I still don't think the AoE damage is better than the Storm build. So even if it had the exact same score, I would put the FireBlaster build below the Storm build because the Storm build just has that consistent AoE. This has a huge big burst window in AoE, but again, the single target really suffers, so only gets 2 out of 5 there. The difficulty is going to be 3 out of 5. So again, that's behind the Storm build as well. The reason I'm giving it 3 out of 5 is, again, you have the Primordial Wave window to manage, and then you also have the new Sundering buff. When you press Sundering, you have to press those Chain Lightnings, and then when you press Primordial Wave, you have to press Lightning Bolt. So there's a bit of a conflict there, and then trying to maximize the amount of Fire Novas that you can fit into the Sundering window can be really hard and a bit of a mental tax. So it's only getting 3 out of 5 for the difficulty, which means it is a harder build to play. Remember, if it was 5 out of 5, it would be an easier build to play. In terms of Maelstrom weapon stack generation, it's only going to get 3 out of 5 again, mostly because of this single target. So on boss fights in Mythic Plus, this really struggles to generate Maelstrom weapon stacks. If you're not getting a hot hand proc in single target, you're basically screwed. So in AoE, it's great. In single target, it suffers. So the Maelstrom weapon stack generation is going to go down there. Okay. The tier set bonus interaction, it's going to be 5 out of 5. This is better than the Storm build. We're actually going to put it there. So this is better than the Storm build. It does have better interaction with the tier set bonus, again, because of the amount of fire damage that you're pumping out. Mastery's buffing it, and you get the 20% buff from the rest of the tier set bonus. So it's just really solid. When you press Sundering and you're in that window, you detonate your Primordial Wave and your haste is going like crazy. You can get like 2 to 3 Fire Novas in that window, and they do crazy amounts of damage. So very strong with the tier set bonus, okay? It still is behind the Storm build overall. It's going to be 18 out of 25. Really, the reason this thing loses a lot of points is because of its single target damage ability. It's very low, and it has a bit of a higher difficulty. It doesn't generate the Maelstrom weapon stacks as high as some of the other builds, so it's going to lose quite a bit of points there. So 18 out of 25 is the final score for the FireBlaster build. All right, the next build on our list is going to be the Elementalist build, of course. This is probably the most popular build on the servers right now in the game for Shaman. A lot of people are running the Elementalist build, but it does have some problems. We're going to get into that in a minute. So the talent tree is very similar to the FireBlaster build. You just take Fire Nova and turn it into Hailstorm, and then you have Ice Strike, of course. This build really involves all 3 elements. You've got nature damage with your Chain Lightning, right, and Crash Lightning. You've got Frost damage with Ice Strike and Frost Shock, and then you have fire damage with the Hot Hand procs, Lava Lash, spreading your Flame Shocks around. You got your big Primordial Wave detonation window. It benefits the best from Elemental Spirits of any build. No matter what spirit you get, you're going to be buffing your damage in some way. But mostly it revolves around Hailstorm, getting those Frost Shocks to detonate in AoE to do lots and lots of damage. This build is really strong, and probably does the most damage out of any of the builds, but has a couple of other struggles there for sure. So let's dive right into the tier maker here over here. Okay, let's just scroll down here. The Elementalist build. Here we go. Damage. We're going to start off with 9 out of 10. It's actually very good. I think it's better than the Storm. Oh, that's total, sorry. Let me just look at the Storm build again really quickly. I think the Storm build was 8 out of 10. Yep. So it has the highest damage of any of the builds here is the Elementalist build, and I believe that is true. I play the Storm build primarily myself, and I feel like with enough time and practice, you could probably do the same amount of damage as the Elementalist build. But somebody who has practiced the Elementalist build, knows how to play it, they will do the most damage of any of the builds that are here that we've seen so far. We'll see how the Flamestrike build does. But so far, this is going to do the highest amount of damage. AoE damage, 5 out of 5. Again, those Hailstorm Frost Shocks are doing crazy amounts of damage. But then the single target damage also goes up really high because of Hailstorm, because of the way it works, right? Not only does your Frost Shock cleave, but your Frost Shock does extra damage, even if it's only to one target. So that's why it gains a bunch of single target damage here, edging out the Storm build, okay? The difficulty is where this build really starts to fall off. In the video I made, I think I gave it a 1 out of 10 for difficulty, and I've come back on that a little bit now. I'm giving it a 2 out of 10, which means it's slightly easier than I initially said it was. But the reality is this build is still, I think, the hardest build to play on this list, and that seriously hurts its viability. And I had some people in the comments talking in YouTube about like how they tried this build out and then it was just like way too complicated for them and they switched over to the Storm build or some other build, and it just, they got their damage went way up because they were able to actually execute the build. Now, this build is so hard to do because it has a builder and then a spender and then a Frost Shock. It has that extra layer, that extra task you have to do on every single rotation, which if you're not used to it, it can be really difficult. Also, inside the Sundering window, you've got a Primordial Wave Lightning Bolt to worry about. You got the 2 Chain Lightnings to worry about from the tier set bonus. And then you also have Hailstorm to worry about. You want to make sure after every spender, you're using a Frost Shock. You have to sometimes empower it with Ice Strike. It's just very complicated. There's a ton of moving parts with this build, and it makes it so that the difficulty is going to be really hard to execute. So for that reason, the difficulty score goes down. It's only going to get a 2 out of 5, which means it's very hard to play, and it's going to hurt your damage if you don't really know what you're doing. So the LA build is going to go down here. Okay? Now, Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation, it's going to go 4 out of 5. It's basically tied with the Storm build. It's a little bit better than the FireBlaster build, which only got 3 out of 5. So it's going to get a 4 out of 5 for that, mostly because the single target Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation is really good because Ice Strike gives you a Maelstrom Weapon Stack guaranteed, and then the Hailstorm Frost Shock will also give you a Maelstrom Weapon Stack guaranteed. So that's the main thing. In AoE, it's never hard to build Maelstrom Weapon Stacks in AoE. It's about the single target boss fights. Can you keep the flow of your build going by building those resources and then cashing in on them? So this is going to get 4 out of 5 for Maelstrom Weapon Stack Generation. The tier set bonus, this is going to get the absolute best score, so far of any of the builds. Even though the FireBlaster build also has 5 out of 5, this build is actually better. It's not better by like an entire point more, but it is better than every other build in terms of Maelstrom, or in terms of the tier set bonus interaction. Why? Because we're using all 3 elements, and therefore the mastery bonus from the tier set bonus, the 24% that we get, buffs all of our damage. No matter what button we're pressing, we're getting a buff to our damage in the Elementalist build. So it's very, very good for that. And then obviously the fire damage bonus afterwards, the 20% fire damage bonus is very good because a lot of the damage on the Elementalist build is fire. Okay? Finally, what's the final score? It's going to be 20 out of 25. So it's going to go in between the Storm and the FireBlaster build. FireBlaster build was 18. The Storm build was 22. This is going to be 20 out of 25 for the final build. Okay, here's the last build. This is the Flamestrike build. And this is a really cool build. I've been trying this the last week, or like last couple days, sorry. And I've actually been really enjoying it. So let's talk about how that build works really quickly. What does the talent tree look like? The Flamestrike build is a combo of like physical plus fire, right? So it kind of has that. You have the Lava Lash over here. You have spreading it around with Molten Assault. So you do have some extra Flame Shock damage coming in. You have a Primordial Wave Burst window. But you still have Thorums and DRE. And the point of the build is still to proc Deeply Rooted Elements as much as you can. But you're getting some consistent damage from Flame Shock, from Lava Lash, spreading that around. You're losing a bit of damage from Alpha Wolf, but you are gaining a really, really big cooldown in Primordial Wave, which once again, when you fit that inside of the Sundering window with our tier set bonus, it produces a lot of extra damage for you. So it's close to the Storm build in terms of that consistent, deeply rooted elements proccing kind of damage. But we're pulling a little bit of that away, and we're adding in a big AoE burst window instead So that's kind of how this build functions, okay? It has fire damage, it has physical damage, it has a bit of nature damage as well. Let's take a look at how it stacks up against the other. Okay, here we go. Here's the Flamestrike build. We've got the sheet over here. Let's see how it kind of stacks up to the rest of the builds. First of all, the AoE damage is, again, going to be solid. 5 out of 5 there. Every build is very, very good at producing AoE damage. It's always going to kind of boil down to the single target damage and how that stacks up. This build is okay for single target damage. It's going to be 3 out of 5, so that's 8 out of 10. Again, I think it's going to fall behind the other two builds, the Storm build and the Elementalist build, in terms of overall damage, but it's better than the FireBlaster one because of that single target buff that you're getting. Being able to press those Storm Strikes back to back to back, and also having the extra consistent damage of the Flame Shock, the Lava Lash coming in, getting those procs on deeply rooted elements where you're just throwing out lightning bolts for free. That really helps out your single target damage a lot. Brings it up just a little bit above the FireBlaster build. Okay, difficulty of this build, it is going to go 3 out of 5. It's not as bad as the I think it's a little bit better than the FireBlaster build, but these are basically the same, actually. The Flamestrike and the FireBlaster build are basically the exact same in terms of difficulty. One of them has to look like they're better than the other, but it's certainly easier to play than the Elementalist build. So the Flamestrike build, it has a similar level of difficulty to the FireBlaster build because of that Primordial Wave, right? It's always going to add a very serious wrinkle that you have to sort of work through. You have to set up your damage, you know, Primordial Wave, Lava Lash to spread it around, then Lightning Bolt, but make sure you're Lightning Bolting inside your Sundering window, and then you have to build up Maelstrom weapon stacks again to deal with the 2 Chain Lightnings that you need to press in AoE. There's a lot of just like stuff going on there. Again, it's the exact same thing as the other builds that have Primordial Wave. This is why the Storm build, in terms of difficulty, is going to be number 1. This is going to get a 3 out of 5 for difficulty right here, okay? Maelstrom weapon stack generation, it's going to be 4 out of 5, okay? So it's going to go above the FireBlaster build, but it's going to be a little bit below the Elementalist build because the Elementalist build does have that extra Hailstorm, Frost Shock in single target, and Ice Strike in single target, which both guarantee a Maelstrom weapon stack. So it's going to be a little bit behind the Elementalist build, but still better than the FireBlaster build, for sure, okay? Definitely better there. Now, the tier set bonus interaction, it's going to be 5 out of 5. Even better than the Storm build. Again, because we're getting that fire damage. Any build that has less of an emphasis on physical damage and more of an emphasis on elemental damage, whether it's fire, nature, or frost, that's going to be a better score in terms of the tier set bonus because that 24% mastery bonus is crazy. And then we also get the 20% physical and 20% fire. So this actually goes above the FireBlaster build. Sorry, I forgot about that. This is going to be even better than the FireBlaster build because the FireBlaster build doesn't really do physical damage. It's only doing fire. The Flamestrike build presses Stormstrike a lot and has that extra Doom Winds cooldown as well. So not only does it have fire damage with spreading your Flame Shocks around, getting those Lava Lashes, but it also has Doom Winds, lots of Wind Fury damage. So you're getting the mastery bonus from the tier set. You're getting the physical and the fire at 20% of each. So it's very, very good. Still not quite as good as the Elementalist build, but it's going to be good above the fire, above the Storm build. Okay? The final score is going to be 20 out of 25. So it's going to be our 3rd place build. It's going to be behind the Elementalist build, even though they have the exact same score. I would actually rate these two builds very, very closely together. I think the Elementalist build edges at the Flamestrike build just a little bit, even though it has a similar score, but mostly because of that single target damage, getting those extra Frost Shocks to generate resources for you, and also just doing a lot of extra damage. So there you go, guys. There's all the builds on the list right there. In first place, we have the Storm build with a total score of 22 out of 25. Next, we have the Elementalist build, which is going to be a total score of 20 out of 25. Then the Flamestrike build is 20 out of 25. And the FireBlaster build is 18 out of 25. I hope this helped you guys a little bit to understand all these different builds. And again, I'm ranking these things based on these criteria, right? It's not just about doing damage. A huge, huge criteria that came into play when I was doing all these different videos was the difficulty score. How difficult is it to execute the rotation of your build and also be able to contribute to your team with extra crowd control and hexes or purging an enemy or dropping a poison cleanse totem for certain bosses or whatever the case might be? How easy is it to do all those other things? Are you too consumed trying to set up your rotation and get your build going, that's a really important factor. So very, very good. And then the Maelstrom Weapon Stack generation is also important. This helps to fuel your damage, right? This helps to make sure you can keep generating resources so you can keep using your spenders, which is what does the most damage in your kit. And then, of course, the current tier set Season 2 bonus interaction is also very, very important to recognize. So there you go, guys. There are the different builds. I do think the Storm build's the best one. I think the Elementalist one is close behind. And the other two fire and physical based builds are just lagging behind a little bit because of the things that I mentioned here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this series. Thank you so much for the comments and the interaction that I've had from you guys. I really do enjoy it. It's awesome. I love bringing these kinds of things to you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments down below about these builds. I would love to hear from you. Have you tried any of these builds out? What is your experience? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Please make sure to drop a like and subscribe on this video. Until the next time, guys, I love you all. I will see you.